The Deloitte Money League 2026 is out. So in this video, I'm going to do two things. First of all, explain what Deloitte actually includes in these numbers and what they absolutely do not include. And then run through every Premier League club in the top 20. Go through the figures, call out what's moved year on year, and give you the present, but I think crucially, the future story for each one. If you do like the business side of football, feel free to subscribe to this channel. I've only just started on YouTube, so I can get into more detail rather than sticking to 1 or 2 minutes on my TikTok channel. So any support is massively appreciated. And if you have any ideas on videos that you'd like me to cover, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll add them to the list. Because to be honest, I actually really like explaining this stuff, which is probably pretty weird, I know. But anyway, what does the Money League actually measure? It basically measures 3 income streams. Match day, that's mainly gate receipts, ticketing, hospitality, memberships, that sort of thing. Broadcast, this is the big one that a lot of people misunderstand. Broadcast includes domestic league distributions, cups, UEFA prize money and distributions, other continental competitions, and even FIFA Club World Cup related money. However, as the Club World Cup took place in the next financial year, the one that we're currently in, that money won't actually be appearing in Chelsea's or Man City's in this league, but it will appear in the 2027 league. The last one is commercial, so that's sponsorships, merch, retail, other commercial operations, and importantly, non-football events at the stadium. So think concerts, tours, NFL games, event hire, all that sort of stuff. Now the critical bit, the bit a lot of people get wrong and can't quite understand. The revenue excludes player transfer fees. So if a club sells £200 million worth of players and buys £50 million, that £150 million profit does not show up as Money League revenue. Deloitte are looking at the club's football business revenue, not trading profits on player registrations. That's also why you can't look at this list and go, well, they've made loads of money, they'll spend loads of money. It's a clue, but it's not the full story. Also, Deloitte say wage costs include basically all employee-related costs, so players, staff, bonuses, social, coaches, the lot. So that's one of the reasons you can't look at that and class it the same as the UEFA squad cost ratio rules, although there's loads of other reasons as well, and I go into loads of detail on that during my full breakdown of Villa's financial state in this video, so watch that one right after this one. Right, with that out the way, let's get into the Premier League clubs that made the top 20 this year. Deloitte say the top 20 clubs generated a record €12.4 billion, up 11% overall. The Premier League still has 9 clubs in the top 20, but the story is interesting because the Premier League isn't owning the very top spots the way people might assume, and it's the first ever time we've not had a single club in the top 4. Liverpool are 5th, €836.1 million, up 17%. Now, you'll hear people try and make this about one random gimmick or just say it's because they won the league. But for me, Liverpool's real superpower is commercial execution. I was on the Overlap a few months ago and I was asked who is the best at sponsorship. I answered Liverpool for a reason. They give sponsors value, not just slapping a logo on a board and calling it partnerships. That keeps brands renewing, upgrading, bigger contracts, and it also attracts new sponsors because everyone can see the output. Deloitte literally talks about clubs investing in retail operations and uses Liverpool as the example, saying they've got physical stores globally. That's the grown-up club mindset. Treat it like an entertainment and retail brand, a proper global brand, not just 90 minutes on a Saturday. Liverpool are building a revenue engine that doesn't just rely on TV deals. That's how you stay strong even when on-pitch results wobble a little bit. If they consistently achieve Champions League football, they will just keep on rising in these money leagues year on year. Manchester City are 6th, €829.3 million, and they're actually down 1% year on year. This is the outlier in the top 10 because almost everyone else is up. But the reality is, when you're already at the top end, staying flat can happen if one of your big revenue drivers dips, especially broadcast, because that's heavily impacted by competition performance and distributions. And as we know, last season was like the first season in a long, long time that City didn't win anything. Listen, they're still a machine, but the growth story paused a little bit. But they recognise this in their own accounting report, saying it's a time for transformation. If they get deep into the Champions League again this season, they'll be closing in on that top 4 again on the 2027 Money League, no doubt. Arsenal are 7th, €821.7 million, up 15%. This is what happens when you combine Champions League football, a highly engaged fan base, and a club that's finally operating like a modern commercial brand again. The on-pitch success pulls multiple levers at wants, it's not just more TV money, it's more global attention, which helps commercial too. They've actually brought in a good amount of people from Liverpool's commercial team over the last few years, so it's no surprise to see them performing as well as they are with sponsorships and activations. They're a bit of an outlier though, in the way that they've not actually won anything for, 4 or 5 years, but their revenues are that of a club who win trophies year on year. I'm sure that'll change this season. They're bound to win something, and when it does, they're only going to increase on all fronts. Manchester United are 8th, €793.1 million, up 3%, but the big headline here isn't the growth, it's the position. United sitting below Liverpool and Arsenal is wild when you remember how dominant they used to be in these lists. They still have one of the strongest commercial bases in the sport, but the modern era reality is if the product on the pitch isn't delivering, it becomes harder to keep pushing growth at the same pace as clubs who are winning, modernising stadiums and maximising every part of the matchday and non-matchday experience. They're still a financial heavyweight, but they're just not accelerating. It goes to show Ed Woodward saying that on-pitch performance doesn't change the off-pitch revenue was completely incorrect. We need to remember these figures include the Europa League prize money, so without that in the figures for the season we're in now, they need to finish high in the Premier League to help balance that out. Otherwise, we might see them drop even further in the future. Tottenham Hotspur are 9th, €672.6 million, up 9%. Spurs are basically the poster child for stadium as a year-round venue. Deloitte explicitly calls out the shift towards greater utilisation of stadium assets through a diversified entertainment offering, non-matchday events and broader stadium experiences. That screams Spurs' model. And this year they'll add the Champions League revenue to the figures. However, they do have €41 million in these figures from the Europa League win, but it looks likely that they'll qualify for the last 16 of the Champions League, so that should secure them around €65 million, even if they get knocked out at that stage. So that's like a minimum. So it'll still be an uplift of around €24 million. This must be really frustrating for Spurs fans, seeing how much money they're generating as a business. However, they're not even in the top 6 for wage spend in the Premier League. Chelsea are 10th, not on wage spend, though much higher than that, but in the Money League, they're 10th, €584.1 million, up 7%. Chelsea are in that big club messy middle phase where the brand is massive, the commercial potential is huge, but the sporting story has been a bit chaotic. Their ceiling is still enormous, but the challenge is converting that into consistent growth without the football doing the heavy lifting. And when you've got co-owners coming out basically saying they aren't that bothered about on-pitch success and more bothered about the enterprise value, this kind of screams of Manchester United 5 years ago. So we could potentially be seeing a story repeating itself here. Aston Villa are 14th, €450.2 million, up 45%. That is a monster jump. There's no getting away from it. It's huge. And as I said earlier, I went deeper into Villa's finances on this video, so go and give that a watch. I might do one similar for Newcastle like this as well, because I think they've got some interesting numbers. But the key thing here with Villa is that these Deloitte numbers are revenue, so they show that Villa's footballing business has grown massively in the last year. That helps, but it doesn't automatically mean that UEFA are fine with everything now, because UEFA's cost controls are a separate framework. So yes, this is progress, and yes, it shows the club is moving into the bigger financial lanes, but it doesn't mean there are no constraints. Commercial is up, but we still have a lot more potential to fill, and we're likely to see a slight drop in the next year due to not having Champions League football this season. It's also going to be really interesting to see what happens with the front of shirt sponsorship from next season, as that's a large part of the commercial number that we see in this report. If they can't replace Patano quickly, that could be disastrous. Newcastle United are 17th, €398.4 million, up 7%, which is one of the things that a lot of people were confused about because they didn't have European football in that season. So how are they still growing? But here's the realistic answer. Commercial ambition. Newcastle clearly moved hard on commercial strategy. And yes, ownership connections can help open doors within the rules. As long as deals are fair value, there's not a problem there. And honestly, that's what all clubs should be doing. Use your owners' networks, be smarter commercially, and build the brand. You don't get much for winning the Carabao Cup. I mean, it's something like £100,000 or something like crazy. But of course, a cup run does add for things like ticket sales and more shirts sold. They sold a lot of shirts, but not enough to outweigh the revenue they'll be receiving from UEFA this season for the Champions League run. So this number can only increase, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them jump a good few spaces next season. Now, West Ham. West Ham are 20th, 296 million euros and down 14%. I honestly feel so sorry for West Ham fans. West Ham keep showing up in these Money League conversations, which tells you the club has a decent revenue platform. But fans aren't watching spreadsheets. They're watching football, facilities, recruitment, ambition. And when ownership priorities skew towards enterprise value and squeezing more from the fan base, whilst penny pinching on things that actually impact performance on the pitch, it becomes self-defeating, because relegation or even just decline is how you destroy enterprise value in the long run. That club is summed up by the stadium and the training ground for me. The exterior is this like commercial, glossy, future-thinking beast akin to the London Stadium. But then behind the scenes, it's nothing short of a market stall, cost-cutting wherever they can, putting profits before people, akin to the shambolic training facilities the ownership refuse to improve. I want to say that things are going to improve for West Ham, as they're a great club, but I'm sorry, I just don't see it. They won't be in the top 20 next year, and I can't see a future where they'll ever appear on it ever again unless that ownership changes. So, zooming out across the Premier League clubs in the top 20, biggest Premier League climber in growth terms was Aston Villa with 45% growth. Strong growth at the top end was Liverpool with 17%, Arsenal with 15%. Solid growth but not insane growth was Spurs with 9%, Chelsea with 7%, Newcastle with 7%. Basically flat was Manchester United on 3%. Only top 10 decliner was Manchester City with -1%. And the biggest Premier League drop was West Ham with -14%. The overall macro trend Deloitte points to is clubs making more money from commercial than ever, and matchday growing fast too, because clubs are treating stadiums like full-time destinations, not part-time football grounds. As I mentioned earlier, this list does not include transfer fees as revenue, so don't use it as net spend ranking. It's a measure of how powerful a club's revenue engine is. This influences what the club can do, but it's not the same as what they will do. If you want, I can do a follow-up video where I go deeper on what the revenue mix tells us, like which club are overly dependent on broadcast, which are building commercial moats, which clubs are one bad season away from their model wobbling. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do subscribe and tell me in the comments what you think of the video, because as I say, this is brand new to me. The editing isn't as highly polished as I'd like. It's a little bit slapdash, but with your feedback and with your support, I'm sure one day it'll be great. And we're right at the very beginning of the journey. Let's see where it takes us.